A desert of ice. 2 miles thick. What secrets do they hold? Secrets in the ice.
Find out.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. This is weird.
What's going on?
Still tapping
You
left.
still have a keyboard problem?
Yeah.
Did you unplug it and plug it back in?
No.
Turn it on and off again. That's
Don't worry about it. I probably have to reboot it, like, but
yeehaw.
I've never had this happen before. Anybody have a problem with their keyboard key and left instead of right? Or tabbing left instead of right?
I've had that with controllers. Yeah, usually is
Ooh.
the
Yeah.
Tina, unplug it and plug it back in. I think that'll do the job.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, Joseph Aldridge says, spoilers, it holds more ice. Now, I think there's more to it than ice, Joseph. There's much more to it than ice. There's secrets in the ice. Maybe even the fabled Nephilim, frozen in ice, washed down there by the flood. But that's a topic for a whole nother time. Yes, that's definitely a topic for a whole nother time. So, let's talk about this. We covered Operation Eye Jump. We talked about Admiral Byrd and his trip to Antarctica, the big military expedition. We covered all of that in detail 2 nights ago. So if you missed that part, feel free to revisit that one at your leisure. We will get into this one tonight. And this talks about the secret base and the Hollow Earth. Now, I want to point out here that this secret diary started floating around in the 70s. And since then, it's become part of Hollow Earth lore. You know, these things all have lore to them. And I think that's what interests me the most in all these various topics that we talk about. There's a great big lore associated with UFOs, or with the ancient world, or with the paranormal. Like, they each have their components that make up the picture of the whole. You know? And I think specifically with the lore we're talking about here of the Hollow Earth, the various theories, and the various people that have been involved with it, going back to people like John Cleve Sims Jr., whose gravestone is a globe of the Hollow Earth. There's actually one of his globes in the Philosophical Society in Philadelphia, I believe. So, you know, he used to travel around and give lectures about the Hollow Earth. This was a thing. This was the thing people did. And they were doing it in all seriousness. This is the time of people printing pamphlets and giving lectures. And that laid the foundation for what comes along in the 70s, where you still got people, I'm sure, printing newsletters. And, you know, these things kind of going around in, like, zines. Lane Teague says, Secrets of the Ice, what does it mean to the Crop Circle song? Yes, the Crop Circle song, everybody. That's a good one. Jared Centerfold says, yeah, Pete, like a flash-frozen Nephilim society, perhaps. Yeah, it could be. I did a video about it. That's one component of the Salt Lake Antarctica thing. That's one component of it. Like, and I like the real fanciful, far-out lore. That's what I like. I like the Nephilim stories. I like the Secret City stories. You know, the Ark of Gabriel stories. Real convoluted, crazy stuff. It's great. It's great. It's captivating. It's absolutely captivating. It is something that you can really sink your teeth into and get all spun out in the lore of it. And it becomes part and parcel associated with Hollow Earth to the same extent the Betty and Barney Hill case relates to UFOs. It's just part of it. It's like part of the fabric of it. And I love that. I love the layers. There's so many layers to it. So I do have some articles to get into tonight. Some interesting stuff that, of course, I found in my digging around. Now, this is Admiral Byrd in 1939, Antarctica, and the mysterious snow cruiser. This article comes all the way back from 2001 from the Hollow Earth Insider website. A few years ago, I spent a great deal of time researching the Arctic and Antarctic exploits of Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd, looking for anything that could explain why his name continues to pop up in any serious study of the Hollow Earth theory. I have already reported in my research about the possible involvement of the Admiral in the exploration of lands located inside our global world. The most significant fact is a lack of proof otherwise that really stands out in our investigation. In the series of reports, The Quest for the Inner Passage, we found that Admiral Byrd, whose family is part of an elitist group through kingship with England's royal family, seemed to know from an early age he was destined to explore the Earth's polar regions. As a matter of fact, his grandmother, when the Admiral was but a small boy, said that child would go to the North Pole one day. Good young Dick, as his family called him, had been groomed from an early age to explore the secret lands. In Quest for the Inner Passage, we learned that a veil of secrecy has covered his expedition from the start. As one biographer put it, there were secrets that would not be talked about. We also learned that the One World Order paymaster, John D. Rockefeller, and his pals had financed every one of his early expeditions. And, much to the dismay of other expedition members, all the scientific information gathered by members of Byrd's first Antarctic expedition, enough to fill 7 large books, was turned over to Rockefeller before anyone else had a chance to study the findings, only to vanish and never be seen again. In early 1938, those in the know were well aware that a war was on the horizon in Europe. The German leader was beginning to flex his muscle as he launched a massive expansion of Germany's borders. On September 23rd, Charles A. Lindbergh, who had been living abroad since the kidnapping of his infant son in 1932, wrote a letter to the United States ambassador to Britain, Joseph Kennedy, in which he stated, "I'm convinced that it is wiser to permit Germany eastward expansion than to throw England and France unprepared into the war at this time. Britain cannot win a war in Europe even with U.S. aid." Germany had been bankrupt since 1931, and their trade balance showed a trade deficit of 432 million marks. An expansion and buildup of war materials was putting additional strain on the German pocketbook. Financial woes were all pushed aside to finance the expansive expedition that was then in the planning stages, an expedition that was important to the Reich's hierarchy for reasons which are kept secret to this very day. On a winter night in 1938, the German research ship Schwabenland cast off the dock in Hamburg, destination Antarctica. Aboard, accompanying the ship's hand-picked crew, were some of Germany's top airmen, technicians, oceanographers, biologists, meteorologists, and earth scientists, all members of the first German Antarctic expedition in 1938 and 39. The people who made up the costly Antarctic expedition were under secret orders not to divulge their mission, the purpose of which is little known today. Enter Admiral Richard E. Byrd. On Saturday, July 8, 1939, Americans across the country opened their morning newspaper to the front page story, not unlike the one from the New York Times quoted below. President directs speed on Byrd trip. Washington, July 7. President Roosevelt moved today to prevent possible extension of Germany's claims to Antarctic areas into the Western Hemisphere by directing Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd to leave in October to territory within the sphere of influence of the Monroe Doctrine. It is apparent that the government was prepared to take the position, if necessary, that any attempts by foreign powers to establish bases west of the 180th meridian in the Antarctic would be considered an unfriendly act. If the $340,000 appropriated by Congress for the expedition permitted, Admiral Byrd said he would outfit 3 ships. His own ship would be the Bear of Oakland, which is to undergo a careful inspection in Boston. He said he would lend it to the government after a new engine had been installed. As we can see from the above, the major confrontation between American and German forces seemed to be a very real and present danger in Antarctica in 1939. However, in retrospect, we find that the German presence in the land of everlasting mystery was publicized reason for Admiral Byrd's hurry-up expedition. At no time did Admiral Byrd, or those under his command, make any attempt to observe what the German expedition was up to. In fact, if you look at a map of Christoph Friedrich's well-documented study of the German expedition. It will show that neither in 38 or 39, nor subsequently in 47 and in 55, did any expedition in Antarctica did Americans come anywhere close to lands claimed by the Germans. Could the stated reason for the 39 expedition, as is often the case in military operations, only a cover for more important secret mission for Admiral Byrd and his fellow members of the 1939 expedition? The following small article, hidden away on the back page of the November 30th, 1939 issue of the New York Times, highlights the possibility. Secret orders taken by Byrd on polar trip. Washington, November 29, Associated Press. Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd joined the vanguard of his South Pole expedition at the Panama Canal today with the confidential orders from the White House. Officers say the orders were a State Department secret. Even the existence of the orders, authorities said, had been kept a secret. Admiral Byrd received them, informants say, on a hurry trip to Washington last week before departing for Panama. Is it possible these secret orders contain the real reason for Admiral Byrd's expedition? Was the fact that Germans were also conducting a secret expedition making the Admiral's real reason for being put together, the American expedition, a matter of utmost importance? Could both expeditions have been carrying secret orders to explore unknown lands beyond the pole? Were the Americans and Germans involved in 1939 in a race to be the first to gain entrance and explore the legendary lands inside our Earth? A race not unlike the space race between America and Russia several decades later. In an upcoming issue, we'll discover this close possibility, but for now, let's look at another mystery. As stated in the Thay, Volume 1, if you're going to explore unknown lands for the first thing, you must have a base camp or last outpost on the edge of the area you wish to explore. Here, you would pitch your radio tent so exploring teams could keep in contact. You also use your base camp as a supply dump for the expedition. In January of 1929, Admiral Byrd established Little America as an outpost for the Antarctic continent. But what if the area to be explored wasn't a barren land of ice and snow? What if it were more supportive of life than we are told, such as unknown, thought to be extinct, huge wild animals and reptiles, and even more dangerous creatures of intelligence equal to or greater than man's? In that case, the best piece of equipment would be some sort of mobile base, one that would enable your expedition crews a way to cover a lot of territory very quickly, and at the same time be a haven of relative safety and adventuresome explorers. Mysterious Snow Cruiser. Front page story from the July 8th, 1939 New York Times. Snow Cruiser offer. The giant snow cruiser, specifically designed to span yawning crevices and jagged ice ridges, may be a major piece of equipment on the Byrd expedition. The cruiser was designed by Dr. Thomas C. Portier of Chicago, second in command of the Byrd expedition in 1933 to 1935. In recent testimony before a House Appropriations Subcommittee, he indicated that the odd craft would carry significant equipment for the exploring party to last a year. On its deck, Dr. Portier suggested the machine could carry a Navy pursuit plane, which by making short flights at 300-mile intervals could explore about 5,000 square miles of unknown territory during a single Antarctic summer. Let that stop and sink in. Significant equipment for an exploring party to last a year. Could explore 500,000 miles of unknown territory. That's a lot of ice and snow, to say the least. Put into perspective, that is equal to 100 auto trips from Anchorage, Alaska to Jacksonville, Florida. Someone was planning an expedition that, in its time, seemed to rival man's first trip to the moon. Naturally, something of this magnitude was destined to capture the interest of the press and citizens of America. So step by step, the government development of the snow cruiser was followed eagerly by the media of the day. From the July 15, 1939 issue of the New York Times, Byrd uses Army tanks on Polar Quest, big snow cruiser, and Antarctic equipment by the Associated Press, excerpts. Boston, July 14th, Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd disclosed plans for the coming expedition in the Antarctic, said today that a 6 Army tanks and a unique 45,000-pound snow cruiser would be used to transport over the South Pole's icy wastelands. The snow cruiser would carry 4 men and a plane and be extremely mobile and easy to manipulate under the difficult conditions found in Antarctica. I found the next significant mention of the snow cruiser in the August 2nd, 1939 issue of the New York Times, in of all places, the Society section. Giant tires soon ready-made in Akron for Antarctic trip. It will weigh 1,900 pounds. Chicago, August 1st, Associated Press. The Armor Institute of Technology said that the first of the giant tires for the ice cruiser of the government-coming Antarctic expedition will be taken from its mold at the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company's plant at Akron on August 9th. Harold Vakdeborg, director of the Armor Foundation, said that the 10-foot tire, each weighing 1,900 pounds, would be the largest ever manufactured. Not to be outdone, many of the nationally read popular magazines at the time also ran their own stories, complete with drawings and diagrams of the giant vehicle. Scientific American ran their story in the January 1940 issue. However, they were beaten to the punch by Popular Mechanics, whose story Snow Cruiser to Explore Antarctic was featured in the October 1939 issue. According to their report, the huge monster vehicle designed to climb the polar mountains and slither across giant crevasses would be 55 feet long and 15 feet wide. The power would be supplied by two 200 horsepower diesel engines that would be connected to generators to furnish power for driving, for radio, electronic stoves, heat, and a machine shop. The giant cruiser would be controlled by one man who would be in the second floor cabin. The Popular Mechanics article continued to describe the vehicle. Below the driver is the repair shop. To the rear, navigation chart desk, galley, which is also photographic darkroom, bunk room, storeroom, and compartment in the tail for 2 spare tires. The cruiser will have a 5,000-mile range and will travel at from 10 to 30 miles an hour under conditions except severe blizzards. An automatic gyro pilot may be installed to hold the cruiser on any set course. Front and rear wheels steer independently so that the Antarctic bus can turn in a 30-degree radius or shift sideways at a 25-degree angle. Scientists will measure thickness of ice with the geophysical seismograph, making gravity determinations and meteorological observations, survey unexplored Antarctic and study the aurora, terrestrial magnetism, meteors, and other phenomena. Cruiser equipment will cost $150,000. That's in 1939. The Popular Mechanics article also reported that the Navy biplane, which carried a 7-inch lens mapping camera, was rigged atop the cruiser in such a way as to be hauled to its perch by winch or launched on the snow in 10 minutes. As the plane moved full bore ahead, with their plans, the public was taken along for the trip through the pages of newspapers across the nation. October 15th, the New York Times ran a picture of the partially completed cruiser, of the partially completed cruiser, along with an article titled, "Bird Expedition Gets Polar Gear. 2 ships, 125 men, 160 dogs, and 5,000 varied items are going to the Antarctic. 5 planes to be taken. 3 tanks and a snowmobile are aid to work. Departure set for early next month. Boston, October 14. Great Antarctic expedition in history, both in numbers and accessories, being assembled here for what may be a tortoise-like race with the German scientists from minerally rich South Pole areas. A century after the first United States Antarctic expedition, this second government-financed group will be directed by Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd, who twice in the last decade has led his own expeditions into the land where nights are 4 months long. Delayed a month, the expedition hopes to leave November 1st, reaching its destination when harbors are ice-free and, if possible, ahead of parties reportedly organizing in Germany and other countries. Once finished, the snow cruiser was driven from the factory in Chicago to the dock in Boston, supported by a police escort that halted traffic along the highways in 20-mile stretches so the huge machine could pass. Thousands of people followed its progress in newspaper articles and in radio reports. Many stopped along the route and made a special trip to try and catch a glimpse of the giant machine. By October 28, 1939, the cruiser was well on its way to Boston, but not without mishap. From the October 29, 1939 issue of the New York Times came the following report. Bird snowcraft founders in creek. 35-ton, 60-foot cruiser hits an Ohio bridge and plunges off-road into water. Lima, Ohio, October 28th. Giant snow cruiser struck a bridge near Gomer about 10 miles from here and stumbled into a stream. The machine dove its nose several feet below the surface of the water while the rest of it was left spanning the stream. It would be several days before the huge machine could be raised from the Pine Run Creek around the trip resumed. Everywhere it traveled, the strange-looking vehicle made headlines. Bird snow cruiser startles Bay traffic. Snarls traffic and crawling over the Berkshires. Special to the New York Times. Boston, Massachusetts, November 30th. The Antarctic snow cruiser, most tenacious road hog ever to invade New England, steered a leisurely bouncing course today, as over the Berkshires from Pittsfield to Farmington, causing the greatest traffic jam in Massachusetts history. One letter to the editor, obviously from someone who had been caught up in the movement of the huge craft halfway across America, published in the November 14, 1939 New York Times, stating that the snow cruiser is a thing that has to be seen to be believed. Once seen, it makes one happy as well as proud to know that soon it will be traveling the Antarctic continent, where it cannot hold up to 70,000 motor cars and create a 90-mile traffic jam as it did in Massachusetts on Sunday. Then, on the November 15, 1939 New York Times headline many had been waiting for. Cruiser aboard bird ship to Sedale. Snowmobile is lashed to deck, and the North Star prepares to leave Boston at dawn today. Settlements projected, Expedition Chief proposed iced habitation for 5 or 6 years to clinch discovery claims. In January 1940, as reported in the January 19th issue of the New York Times, the closely watched, well-documented machine arrived in Antarctica. Bird's cruiser in the Antarctic crash. Bouncing Betty narrowly escapes disaster, leaving ship in the Bay of Whales. Special to the New York Times. Washington, January 18th. A narrow escape from disaster in moving the Bird Arctic snow cruiser from the ship to the ice at the expedition's landing place in the Bay of Whales. Amid a welter of flying splinters and broken planks, the gigantic snow cruiser lumbered safely ashore tonight from the Antarctic service ship North Star. The cruiser kept on the move once all 4 of her 10-foot wheels reached treacherous bay ice alongside the ship. Remaining at the controls, Dr. Thomas C. Poitier of Chicago drove her a full mile before the ship before coming to a halt. As we can see from the documentation, the snow cruiser was the star of Admiral Byrd's 1939 Antarctic expedition. For months, Americans had read every tiny detail about the progress of manufacturing the beast. The delivery was like the coming of a circus parade, and those close enough or lucky enough to travel to the publicized routes lined the highways as the celebrated vehicle passed by. In fact, the snow machine was featured in every newspaper headline concerning the preparations for the 1939 Antarctic expedition. But after the outpost on wheels was reported to have made it safely to the mysterious continent, the mystery begins. From this point now on, the snow cruisers never mentioned again. I've spent many hours searching through back issues of newspapers and magazine indexes. After that final report, nothing. Once again, as with any investigation into bird shenanigans in the polar regions of our globe, a lead I was following had vanished like a puff of smoke. It was as though the snow cruiser never existed. What happened to the monster machine and the data it was designed to gather? Could it and a hand-picked crew, once unloaded, have gone off on a mission of their own? A mission so secret that it has not been talked about even to this day. One final newspaper article might hold a couple of clues. The May 15th issue of the New York Times carried a lengthy article detailing Admiral Byrd's report on the findings of the 1939 United States Antarctic Service expedition. The Admiral reported the expedition achieved much more than he thought possible, including the discovery of 900 miles of unknown coastline that explorers had been seeking for hundreds of years. In the lengthy interview, the never mentioned in the snow cruiser, even a stranger, what was apparently, In a lengthy interview, he never mentioned the snow cruiser. Even stranger was that apparently he was never asked. The giant machine that had been on everyone's minds and lips before Byrd left might as well never have existed. He did tell us that 59 men were left behind to carry on. Were these brave souls and crew the support team for a secret mission, using the mighty cruiser to explore the lands beyond the poles? This article also tells us that. The Admiral emphasized the fact that this was not another Byrd expedition, but a project sponsored by the United States government. In other words, John D. Rockefeller and his pals didn't foot the bill this time. Uncle Sam did. He ended the interview with a statement that henceforth he will direct the expedition from Washington. Are these small clues pointing towards what many have said all along? That Admiral Byrd dedicated his life to exploring lands inside our Earth with entrances at the poles. Is this true?